Welcome to Bio 3, first lecture. Today we will talk about biology. What is biology? And also the characteristic of life. So, how would you define biology? What do we study in this class? I'll give you a definition right now. Biology is the scientific study of life. So, when we break down the word biology into bio in Latin it means life, and then logi. In Latin it means logic or the study of. So biology, when you combine the two parts together, it means the scientific study of the life. But then how do we define life, and how do we define the scientific study? So in this first part of the lecture, we will talk about the definition of life. And then in the next video lecture, we will talk about scientific method. So all living organisms, let's put it this way. How do we know something that is living or something that is dead? It turns out that all living organisms, they have 7 characteristics. And believe it or not, if you Google it on the internet, you'll see that the 7 characteristics of life, they are different from one another. It really depends on which textbook you use and which professor teach you. But for the sake of our course, because we are using the same textbook, we're using the textbook. So I'll use the textbook version of the 7 characteristics of life. So they are, if you are a living organism, you are organized in certain way. I'll explain to you what it means organized. Require material and energy. It's like it's like you need to eat, basically. Reproduce, well, you all know what it means, you know. And then respond to stimuli. Respond to stimuli, well, it has something to do with how we detect the changes outside the world. Homeostatic. Okay, this is a big topic. Homeostatic, very, very important. Why? Because in human physiology, homeostasis is actually a major theme in physiology. This is what we study. And I'll explain more as we go through it one by one. Grow and develop. Well, grow and develop, it is very straightforward, but we'll talk about that later. And then adapt. Adaptation is very, very important. It has a lot to do with evolution, and we will talk about evolution later in this course. Okay, let's start to talk about being organized first. First of all living organisms, we are organized. We need to know, in order to study how living organisms organize, we need to learn about the level of organization. What do I mean by level? So some of you may know that if we break down anything to the smallest particle, we call the particle atom. So this is what it means in here, atom. And if we break down atom even more, we will have neutron, proton, and electron. But we will talk more about the atoms later in the course, in a few lectures later. And then if we put several atoms together, what do we get? We'll get molecules. And if we link lots of molecules together to form different structure, what do we get? We get cells. Cell is the smallest repeated subunit of life. Cell is the smallest unit of life. In other words, our body is made up of many cells. If we look at this pine cone here, this pine cone, as you can see in here, it is made up of a repeated subunit. We call it scales. So all the scales, they look similar. And this is what we call organized. Our human body organized in a similar fashion in that our body is made up of cells. Our body is made of cells. And then if we put the same type of cell together, and so that the group of cells, they perform similar function, we call it tissues. So remember, same group of cells together forms a tissue, and then if we have different tissue, okay, before we move on, let me ask you some question. So can you name me some example of cells? Well, the thing about this, okay, let me tell you some example of cell. For example, some of them are nerve cell, we call it neuron. And then skin cells, we have bone cells. And then tissue, when you have multiple brains, neuron or nerve cell together, what do they form? They form nerve fiber. They form nervous tissues. And then when you have lots of skin cells together, they form skin tissues. When you have bone cells together, they form bone tissues. And then when you have different tissues grouped together, what do we get? We get something called organ. So can you give me some example of organs? Well, my favorite organ, of course, is the brain. And then we also have an organ like skin. Yes, skin is the largest organ in your body in terms of surface area. It has well, actually no. Actually, the lung has the largest surface area. So skin is the large organ. Skin is an organ, and then what? And then the what else? You have organ like stomach. You have organ like liver. These are all organ. And then when you have several organs put together and they work to form something called an organ system here. Organ system, in our body, we have approximately 11 organ systems. And this is what we study in physiology. And can you name some organ systems? Of course, my favorite one is the nervous system. And then we have cardiovascular system. We have the skeletal system, and so on. What if we put the 11 organ systems together? What do we get? We'll get an organism. In this case, it is a human being. What if you put multiple, many organisms together? What do we call that? When we put multiple or many organisms together, we'll get population. So when you put many human beings together, so we have a population of human beings. When you put a lot of trees together, we have a population of trees, and we can call it a forest. What if you have multiple population together? You have a population of human, a population of trees, and then you have a population of grasses. What do we call that? We call this a community. And then, what if you have multiple community together? What do we call that? When we have multiple community together, we call it an ecosystem. Last but not least, if we group multiple ecosystems together, what do we get? We get the biosphere. Biosphere is basically the entire Earth, to make it simple. So why do I go through all this? Well, in the exam, guess what? In the exam, I'll ask you to arrange these terms in, let's say, from largest to smallest. or from smallest to largest. So it will be like, so you will need to know, you will need to memorize the order: atom, molecule, cell, tissue, organ system, organism, population, community, ecosystem, and biosphere. This is from smallest to large. And then you need to know the reverse from large to small as well. So I may pick just all these 4 or 5 with organism to ask you to arrange them from smallest to largest, or I will ask you to arrange these 5 from largest to smallest. I don't know, I don't remember the question, but you know, this is the question that I like to ask for my student in the exam. And then the next one we'll talk about is the acquire material and energy. So what does it mean? Well, first of all, we need to know that the sun is the ultimate energy source of everything on Earth. The sun is the ultimate energy source of everything on Earth. And if you remember the movie Matrix, you know that, okay, if the Earth is blocked by the sun, then we have no energy. That's why the computer, they have to harvest human being as an energy source. Okay, that's the whole basis of the movie Matrix. And that's why the sun is important. And then on the Earth, the producer, they are usually plants. The producers are the ones that absorb solar energy. They are like the solar panel on the roof of people's home. They absorb solar energy, and then they convert the solar energy into food, like glucose. And they also they also use solar energy to split water into oxygen gas. So we will talk about this in photosynthesis lecture several weeks later. Producer, they are the one that produces food and oxygen for consumer to eat. In other words, all human beings are consumer. But you may argue that, well, no, farmers, they grow food, right? Farmers, they grow food, but they do not produce food. That's the differences. We human beings, by ourselves, we cannot produce food. We can farm on the land. We can do that to make more producer, to let the producer to produce food. We human beings are consumers. We can only eat other stuff, eat the products from the producer, eat the produce, so-called. And then we also have decomposer. Decomposers, they are the like the bacteria or some kind of fungus, some kind of insects. All those, they will break down the dead matters. When a living organism is dead, then all these decomposer, fungus, bacteria, insects, they will eat or digest the dead bodies, and we call them decomposer. As you can see that the red arrow here, all the red arrow, they tell you that the energy transfer. So the sun will give out solar energy to the producer, and then when the consumer, like human being, rabbit, or the eagle, when the consumer consume the producer, there will be a heat loss. There will be heat loss from the producer, there will be heat loss from the consumer. In other words, the energy transfer from the sun to the producer, you already have some energy loss in the producer. And then when the consumer consumes the producer, you also have some energy loss as heat. And then last but not least, when the consumer is dead, when the decomposer break down the consumers, there will also be some energy loss as heat. So heat loss are inevitable. It's not 100% perfect transfer of energy. Later in this semester, we'll talk about the laws of thermodynamics. It will explain to you how come there's inefficiency or why there's imperfectness in terms of transferring energy. So this picture here shows you that leopard is eating. I cannot. I cannot recognize what type of animal is that. So this is what we meant consuming or harvesting energy. So for consumer, the only way they can harvest energy is to eat other animal, other consumers or producers.